If you thought you had seen everything when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys, think again. Because what just happened involving Jerry Jones is something this franchise has never done in over 3 decades. And I'm telling you right now, this could change the future of the Cowboys forever. Jerry Jones, the man who has been synonymous with the Dallas Cowboys for over 3 decades, the man who bought this team back in 1989 and turned it into the most valuable sports franchise on the entire planet, has just made an announcement that has sent shockwaves through the NFL and honestly through the entire sports world, and the gravity of what he said cannot be overstated. Because this is not a minor organizational tweak. This is not some front office reshuffling that happens every few years and ultimately changes nothing. This is a fundamental, ground-level transformation of how the Dallas Cowboys are going to operate going forward, and the implications of it stretch far beyond just one season or one draft class or one free agency period. This touches everything: the roster, the coaching staff, the salary cap philosophy, the entire culture of a franchise that has been built around one man's vision for 35 years. Jerry Jones held a press conference at the Star in Frisco, Texas, and in that press conference, he made an announcement that left reporters in the room literally speechless. And I am not exaggerating when I say that, because the video of that press conference has already gone viral, and you can see the faces of the journalists sitting in that room, and their jaws are on the floor, because Jerry Jones announced that he is stepping away from his role as the general manager of the Dallas Cowboys. And I know what you are thinking right now. You are thinking, wait, did he just say stepping away from the general manager role? And yes, that is exactly what happened. Jerry Jones, the man who has controlled every single roster decision, every single draft pick, every single free agent signing, every single coaching hire for the last 35 years, has announced that he is relinquishing his control over the football operations side of the Dallas Cowboys. And this is absolutely massive. And let me tell you why. Because context matters here, and the full weight of this moment only hits you when you understand just how long people have been waiting for something like this to happen. For years, and I mean for years, decades even, the number one criticism of the Dallas Cowboys have been that Jerry Jones is too involved in the football decisions. And look, I'm not here to bash Jerry Jones because the man is a business genius. There's no denying that. He bought the Cowboys for $150 million back in 1989, and the franchise is now worth over $9 billion. That is an extraordinary return on investment, and the man has built an empire around this team with AT&T Stadium and the global merchandising and the branding operation that makes the Cowboys the most recognized sports brand on the planet. But when it comes to the actual football side of things, the results have spoken for themselves, and those results have not been pretty, because the Dallas Cowboys have not been to a Super Bowl since the 1995 season. That is nearly 30 years without even making it to the big game. And in that time, they have won exactly 0 NFC championship games. And they have had countless heartbreaking playoff exits that have left fans feeling like the ceiling on this team is permanently capped. And a significant portion of the football world has pointed the finger directly at Jerry Jones and his insistence on being the general manager of this team, on being the final word on every personnel decision regardless of what anyone else in the building thought. Now, what makes this announcement so shocking is that Jerry Jones has been asked about this hundreds of times over the years, literally hundreds of times. Reporters have asked him, Jerry, would you ever consider hiring a real general manager? Would you ever consider stepping back from the football decisions and letting a football specialist run the personnel side of things? And every single time, without fail, Jerry Jones has said no. He has said that being the general manager is his passion, that it is what gets him up in the morning, that he loves being involved in every aspect of the team, and he's been defiant about it. He's been almost proudly stubborn about it. And honestly, a lot of people had completely given up hope that this day would ever come. So when he walked up to that podium and made this announcement, it was like a bomb went off in the NFL world. And the aftershocks are still being felt right now as we speak. Let me read you some of what Jerry Jones actually said, because his words were carefully chosen and genuinely emotional. He said, "I've spent 35 years pouring my heart and soul into this football team, and I have loved every single minute of it. But I have come to realize that the best thing I can do for this organization and for our fans is to bring in someone who can dedicate 100% of their focus to the football operations while I continue to focus on the business side of things." And he went on to say that this decision did not come easy and that he has been thinking about it for a long time. And he said that conversations with his family, particularly his son Stephen Jones and his other children, who are all deeply involved in the organization, played a significant role in bringing him to this conclusion. And you could hear in his voice there was weight behind those words. There was an acknowledgement that this moment represented something larger than a simple title change. It was a man coming to terms with the fact that love alone is not always enough. That passion without the right structure can become a limitation rather than a strength. And here's where it gets really interesting, because Jerry Jones did not just announce that he is stepping away from the general manager role. He also announced who is going to be taking over. And this is where Cowboys fans should be getting very excited, because the name that Jerry Jones mentioned is someone who has been widely regarded as one of the brightest football minds in the entire NFL. Someone who has a proven track record of building winning rosters, of making smart decisions in the draft and in free agency, of identifying value where others see none, and of structuring a roster in a way that maximizes both talent and cap flexibility at the same time. And look, more details are still coming out. The full picture of this hire is still developing. But what I can tell you is that this is a serious hire. This is not Jerry Jones handing the keys to some yes man who is just going to do whatever Jerry tells him to do behind closed doors. This is a legitimate football person who is going to have real authority and real power to make decisions. And that distinction matters enormously, because it is the difference between a title and actual control. Let me give you some context here, because over the years, Jerry Jones has had people with titles like Vice President of Player Personnel or Director of Scouting, and everyone in the NFL knew that those titles were largely ceremonial. Because at the end of the day, Jerry Jones was making every single decision, and the people beneath him were there to execute his orders and validate his instincts. And that has been the fundamental structural problem with the Cowboys for 3 decades. Because no matter how talented the coaching staff was, no matter how skilled the scouting department was, it all came down to one man and his judgment on any given day, and there was no checks and balances system in place. There was nobody who could push back on Jerry and say, hey, maybe we should not do this. Maybe we should think about this differently. Maybe the data is pointing us in another direction. And the absence of that kind of institutional friction is exactly why the team has made so many questionable decisions over the years. Decisions that in hindsight were driven by emotion or loyalty or ego rather than cold football logic. And I think what finally pushed Jerry Jones to make this decision is the accumulation of the last several seasons. Because let us be completely honest, the last few years have been genuinely painful for Cowboys fans. And I say that with full awareness of how talented this roster has been on paper. Because we have watched this team go all in with Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons and a collection of other talented players at virtually every position. And yet the results on the field have been consistently disappointing, not just in the regular season, but especially in the moments that matter most, the playoff games, the elimination scenarios, the stages where championship-caliber teams prove what they are made of, and the Cowboys have come up short in those moments repeatedly. And the way the team has handled free agency and the salary cap has been questionable at best, leaving fans with a nagging feeling that there is a structural ceiling on this team that no amount of individual talent can break through on its own. I think Jerry Jones heard that frustration, and more importantly, I think he actually processed it this time rather than deflecting it, because there is a difference between hearing criticism and internalizing it. And for most of his tenure as general manager, Jerry has been very good at hearing the criticism and then proceeding to do exactly what he was going to do anyway. But something shifted this time, and whether it was a series of private conversations with people he trusts or a moment of personal reflection or some combination of both, the result is the same. And here we are watching the Dallas Cowboys enter a new era. Now let me talk about the reaction to this news, because the fan response has been something else entirely. And I have been scrolling through social media for the last several hours, reading the comments and posts, and it is a genuinely fascinating mix of emotions. On one hand, you have Cowboys fans who are absolutely ecstatic, who are celebrating like the team just won something, because they have been waiting for this moment for years, and they feel like this is finally the first real step toward the Cowboys becoming a legitimate contender instead of just a contender on paper. And on the other hand, you have fans who are strangely emotional about it, who feel a complicated kind of sadness. Because love him or hate him, Jerry Jones is the Dallas Cowboys in a way that very few owners are synonymous with their franchise. He's the most recognizable owner in professional sports. And the idea of the Cowboys without Jerry Jones pulling the football strings is genuinely disorienting in a way that is hard to articulate. And then you have the rest of the NFL world reacting to this. And let me tell you, the other 31 fan bases are paying very close attention right now, because everyone understands that if the Dallas Cowboys actually get their front office right, if they actually have a competent general manager making decisions based on football merit rather than personal preference, this team could become absolutely terrifying, because the Cowboys already have the resources, they already have the brand. They already have the ability to attract top free agents and elite coaches. They play in the largest market with the most passionate fan base and the most commercial power of any franchise in the sport. And if you layer a smart front office on top of all of that infrastructure, the NFC is in serious trouble, and honestly, the entire league should take notice, because a well-run Dallas Cowboys operation is not just a good team. It is a juggernaut. I also want to talk about what this means for the current coaching staff, because as of right now, the head coach situation is one of the more interesting subplots developing around this story. And with a new general manager coming in, there is a very real possibility that the new GM is going to want to bring in a head coach that he has a pre-existing relationship with, a coach who shares his philosophy and his vision for what this team needs to become. And that could mean a significant overhaul of the entire coaching structure. And honestly, that might not be a bad thing, because while there have been some good moments from a coaching standpoint, the team has consistently underperformed in high-stakes situations, and a fresh alignment between the front office and the coaching staff, where both sides are working from the same blueprint rather than navigating around each other, could unlock a version of this team that Cowboys fans have never actually gotten to see. Let me also talk about the elephant in the room, which is what this means for Jerry Jones going forward, because he made it very clear in his press conference that he is not selling the team. He is not retiring. He is not disappearing. He is still the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, and he is still going to be deeply involved in the business operations, the marketing, the stadium, the commercial partnerships, and all of the infrastructure that has made this franchise the most valuable in sports. But the football decisions, the roster construction, the draft strategy, the free agent prioritization, the coaching hires, all of that is going to be handled by the new general manager. And Jerry said explicitly that he's going to trust the process and let the football people do their jobs. And look, I will fully believe it when I see it play out in real time, because Jerry has given us plenty of reasons to be skeptical over the years. But the fact that he held a formal press conference and made this announcement publicly and on camera tells me that there is genuine commitment behind it. Because when you put something that's significant on the record in front of the entire sports world, backing away from it becomes enormously costly to your credibility and your legacy. I want to give real credit to Stephen Jones here, because from what I am hearing, Stephen has been one of the driving forces behind this decision, and Stephen has been working alongside his father for years, learning the organization from the inside, watching the dynamics of how decisions get made and where the friction points are. And I think Stephen understood something that perhaps only someone on the inside could fully appreciate, which is that the long-term health of this franchise required a structural change rather than just a philosophical one. And having that conversation with Jerry Jones, who built everything from nothing and who has an enormous personal investment in the way things have always been done, that is not an easy conversation to have. And the fact that Stephen had it and that Jerry ultimately listened says something genuinely meaningful about where this family is in their thinking about the future of this organization. At the end of the day, this is about winning. It has always been about winning. Jerry Jones wants another Super Bowl more than just about anything. And I believe he finally arrived at the conclusion that the best path to that Super Bowl runs through a front office structure that divides responsibility intelligently rather than concentrating everything in one place. And that realization, coming from a man who has controlled everything for 35 years, is the most significant thing to happen to this franchise in a very long time. Now let me talk about what this means for the roster going forward, because with a new general manager in place, the entire philosophy around team building could shift dramatically. And I think one of the first things a new GM is going to focus on is the salary cap situation, because the Cowboys have navigated the cap in ways that have sometimes left them without the flexibility to respond to opportunities. And a smart general manager is going to come in and evaluate every single contract on this roster and every dollar of dead money and make sure that the financial structure of this team is set up to compete sustainably rather than just competitively in the short term. Because there's a difference between those two things, and the Cowboys have not always made that distinction clearly enough. And speaking of the roster, there are major decisions ahead involving some of the biggest names on this team. Players like Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons and Trayvon Diggs and others who either carry significant cap numbers or who are approaching the point where their own contract situations need to be addressed. And how the new general manager approaches those decisions is going to tell us everything about the direction and the timeline of this rebuild or retool or whatever word you want to use for what is coming. Because those are not just roster decisions. They're statements about what this franchise believes in and what it is willing to sacrifice in pursuit of a championship. I genuinely believe this is one of the most significant stories to come out of the NFL in years, not just for Cowboys fans, but for the league as a whole. Because for 35 years, the Cowboys have been a cautionary tale about what happens when ego and control get in the way of sound organizational thinking. And now they have an opportunity to rewrite that narrative entirely, to become a model for how a legacy franchise can evolve and adapt and position itself for a new era of success. And whether that happens or not is going to depend entirely on the execution of what comes next, on whether the new general manager is given the genuine authority his title implies, on whether the coaching staff gets the right talent in the right direction, and on whether Jerry Jones can do what he has never done before, which is trust someone else to make the calls on the football field. The next few weeks are going to be extraordinary in Dallas, and I will be watching every single development with the intensity of someone who understands exactly how much is riding on what happens next, because this moment is bigger than one offseason. This is the Cowboys betting on a different future, and the whole NFL is watching to see if they can pull it off.